Alright, so about almost a year ago, I started reading Sugar Hill, but I didn't finish it. I don't know why I didn't finish it, but I'm going to go ahead and finish it now. I'm not going to finish it. I'm going to read chapter 2. So, the last time we read, we were talking about Flambe and Marie and Ben, and Flambe had the strongest personality, and Ben he had a crush on Marie, and Marie was just kind of this damsel in distress, and Flambe raped Marie. She didn't like it, and neither did Ben. So, chapter 2. Marie awoke first, and she was acutely aware of two nude bodies pressed against her as she lay on her side. Her breasts and abdomen were tightly fitted against Ben's back and buttocks. Crushed against her back was Sheffield. She eased herself out from between the two men. Her lips felt sore, and her chin was raw from the stubble of Ben's beard and the coarse hair on Sheffield's face. She got to her feet, careful not to disturb the men, and hurried toward the pond where she wished to bathe. A dozen or more dark blue kingfishers dove at the surface of the water, breakfasting on water bugs and unwary fish. They darted to the far end of the pond as Marie lowered herself into the water. She stood on a sill of rock and watched herself. Her body ached and her skin was tender. She thought about the previous evening and sighed. She had been what they would call a prostitute, since she was old enough to fumble with the buttons of a man's pants. But she had never before had two men at once. That poor girl. That poor girl. First, Flambe, impassioned and unruly as a bull, took her without mercy, while Ben did his best to ignore what they were doing. Then he gave in to the heat of the moment and turned over and to watch. Oh, that is crazy. Anyways, he began stroking and fondling Marie as Sheffield expended himself into her. That is so gross. Listen to this. Sheffield rolled off, still grunting with pleasure, and Ben climbed on. Oh my goodness, that poor girl. His eyes were hurt and passionate at the same time. He kissed Marie where Sheffield had kissed her. "I'm sorry about what happened last night, Marie," said Ben, coming up behind her and staring at the ground. "Forget it," she replied blithely. "It meant nothing to me." She continued bathing herself. Ben, angry more at himself than Marie, climbed onto a rock and dove into the pond. When he surfaced, Marie, feeling remorse for being sharp with him, smiled and tossed him the soapwood. I wonder what is soapwood. Is that real? Like, can you really, get some soap from a tree and put it in some water, get some tree bark, and put it in the water and then wash yourself up with it? I don't know if that's real. We're going to look that up. It's like having our own private bath, isn't it? "Yes," agreed Ben. "It sure outdoes the little copper tub used on the ship." Does it? I guess so, it would. "Did you like working for Flambe?" "Yes," he replied quickly. "What made you become a pirate, Ben?" "There's not much left for a man to do once he's been in prison and been deported to the islands." "I understand. That's why I became a prostitute, except the word starts with a W." She emitted a high-pitched laugh. "Who am I fooling anyway? I was a prostitute that starts with the W in London long before I got to Port Royal." I'd still be in England if I hadn't gotten into trouble. What do you mean? Well, I'd been sick and I hadn't been working. When I finally did get a customer, he was a rich man, fat, I remember, and quite rude. My rent was several weeks behind. My landlady was threatening to throw me out on the street. I guess I wasn't very responsive to him. I still wasn't feeling well, and I was worried about the rent money. Anyway, he refused to pay me, so I lifted his watch. I wasn't very smart, you see. My fat gentleman caller turned out to be a court magistrate. A court magistrate is like a judge. That's a big deal. Just making a mistake. I was sentenced to Newgate. And that's kind of a double standard, though. Like, she stole from him, but he is a court magistrate who picked up a prostitute. So I don't know if prostitution was illegal, but that's not very moral. I was there 5, maybe 6 months before I deported to Port Royal. Let me tell you, it was a blessing, even though the trip was vile. People were sick and dirtying themselves. They must have been using a bathroom on themselves. We were jammed together into a hole as tight as kernels on an ear of corn. We could hardly walk to the privy. The floorboards were slick with, she grimaced. But that's all behind me now. I had quite a nice setup in Port Royal. I was very popular. I was. Why, you were the prettiest lady in town, said Ben, not wanting to use the word, prostitute with the W. Thank you. I was saving my money, too. When I had enough, I was going to go someplace else, maybe even America, and start a whole new life. I figured nobody had to know what I was. So you have ambitions, Marie, said Ben in surprise. Of course I do. Do you think I want to end up just being a prostitute that start with a W in Port Royal? Marie frowned. But now that the earthquakes come and destroyed everything I own and buried my money under all the debris, I guess I'm back to where I started. But you're alive, Marie. I'll bet you and me and Flambe are about the only people left alive from the quake. That's something to think about, wouldn't you say? He reached out and touched Marie on the shoulder. She stiffened. I was stiffened too after what happened last night. Don't you want me to, Marie? Do I have any choice? She replied fiercely. Why, of course. Last night wasn't the way things are going to be. I promise you that. I want to belong only to one man, Ben, not the both of you. Good. Then you'll belong to me, he said, letting the tips of his fingers trail over the mounds of her breasts. Just like Devonshire cream. You are well named, Marie. She smiled thinly. I named myself. I never had a last name. His fingers touched her rosy nipples. They shivered and began to grow hard. Oh, Ben, do you want me to stop, Marie? Oh, no. It's just that he's asleep. Ben cupped Marie's heavy breasts in his hands as if he were weighing them. Come to me, Marie. She moved toward him, the tips of her nipples pressed against his bare muscular chest. She lifted her face to Ben, and he kissed her full on the lips. Now, don't that just make a pretty sight? Flambe's rough voice parted them. I should say that differently. Now, don't that just make a pretty sight? That's how Flambe said it. They looked at it, the older pirate who had awakened. He was standing at the edge of the pond, fully nude, and was scratching the profuse red hair covering his stomach. No time for that now. We've got to get moving. He glanced at the shimmering sun. It must be nearly 8 o'clock. Come on, get yourselves dried off. We'll be wanting to put together breakfast and some sort and moving out. Probably can't cover more than 10 miles today across the mountain backs. That man got up and he didn't even wash up. Nasty. These two people were at least taking a bath. Ben and Marie climbed out of the pond without questioning. The sun's warming rays quickly dried their flesh. Neither spoke, nor did they look at one another. With some shame, they realized that they were bound to the red-haired pirate. He was their hope for survival. If they did not follow his orders, they would surely be left behind to fend for themselves. Flambe climbed into the breeches and boots and called out orders to the duo. Marie, if there are kingfishers about, there are bound to be nests filled with eggs. You go look for them and get a fire going. So kingfishers must be a type of bird. Ben, you and I will see if we can find some meat. He wrapped the scarf around his waist and stuck the machete through it. That's looking like a real pirate right there. Hurry, Ben. By the time we hunt and eat, if we'll be 90-30, whoa, I'm sorry. By the time we hunt and eat, if we'll be 9:30 or so. So I think that's a typo. I think it's supposed to be, it will be 9:30 or so. The days have gone. Tomorrow morning we should get up earlier. Perhaps we should forego the late night activity, replied Ben while dressing. Flambe cocked his head to one side and looked at Ben, but he made no reply. A short time later, Marie found herself climbing over the rocks leading to the top of the waterfalls in search of kingfishers' nests. She made her way very carefully across the narrow ledge. It was a natural rock formation 10 feet above the ground. She dared not look down, for Marie had always been afraid of heights. She closed her eyes and felt her way along the side of the mountain. Suddenly, her heel became caught on a thick vine. Her right shoe was torn from her foot and fell down. Dang! Except she said the other word. She groaned. What if I can't find it? At the same time she lost the shoe, she found a kingfisher nest with 5 large eggs. Supposing they're half-hatched, she grimaced. She took the nest eggs and all and held it under her arm as she made her way back to the edge of the falls. So that's part 1 of chapter 2, and then I'll come back again to finish up chapter 2. Bye.